Good. So we start. Welcome to all students, staff, but also others that might be joining us online. Welcome to this, I think, fifth meeting, this fifth talk of the College of Europe, that we are having informal conversations with guests with very different backgrounds, touching on very different topics. During which in 1 hour we have an insight on again one or the other of the topics that are most of mainly interesting for our students, but also for the current affairs. And then we have an interaction with students. Students can ask questions in the chat, and I will try to read them out to our guest. Our guest this afternoon, and I thank her for joining us on a Friday afternoon, is Giovanna PANCHERI. First of all, a friend for me, an alumna, because she has been at the College of Europe in Bruges with the promotion Montesquieu, and correspondent journalist, correspondent first to Brussels for many years, and then from the United States. Back to Rome, I believe, now since very few days, and also a very knowledgeable and interesting and interested, I would say, observer of the US elections and the US dynamics, and having just published a book on that in Italian. But for our students that speak Italian, the book is available in our library. Yes, sure. We have
I'm happy. Anyway, is this? Oh, sorry. Is
the
this
other
one?
way? Yes, excellent. Rinascita Americana, the American Renaissance, where she describes in a very interesting way, I think, the way that led to the change in administration. And I thought that it would be very interesting for us and for our students in particular to exchange with Giovanna on several different topics and at different layers, if I can say so. On one side, obviously, on the US elections, having followed them very closely and presenting the book, but also on her job. Being a correspondent either from the United States or from Brussels is definitely something that I think is extremely interesting for our students to know how it is from the inside. Many of our students have just finished a simulation game, some of them this week, some others last week. And some of them were playing the journalist and the correspondent. So they were asking also me, how is it in the press room? How is the dynamic? How are news reported? What is the role of media? So I think that also having an insight on how is it to tell the European Union but also the United States is an interesting part. And obviously, as an alumna, I think that having you back somehow is also a pleasure. So for me, it's really a pleasure to have you with us, only virtually, but obviously, hopefully in person as soon as movement will be a bit easier. And Giovanna, I will ask you to tell us a little bit to start with about your book, about the US elections, about what you have witnessed, and to share with us your insight on this, and then again I will move to the questions. So thank you again, grazie for joining us, and I'll pass you the floor.
Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you to the college. And I have to say, in the past, weeks for the promotion of my book, I had a lot of, meeting virtual conference with students around Italy, different kind of university, even high schools. But this particular meeting is for me very special. Being an alumni, and I have in my heart the College of Europe. So thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to talk about my book to the student of a place that I still love and I still have in my memory. By the way, my first class on European journalism, actually I had it at the College of Europe because, my degree, it was in political science in Italy. I was doing my Erasmus as well in France, and then I did like an internship experience in the US while I was still at university. But then just at the college, I had the first real class on journalism and on European journalism. It was not a compulsory class. I don't know if it's still there because, some time has passed since the Montesquieu promotion, but I remember that it was really interesting for me, you know, to see, to be confronted for the first time with the different style also of European journalists on how to tell the news of the EU. And these two topics, the European Union and journalism, have always been my interest since I was really a kid. And, you know, that's also one of the reasons why after my degree, instead of studying like journalism or communication, I decided to come to college, because I think that it was the best opportunity to know very well the European Union. And one of the things about journalism that I learned in my more than 50 years of experience now is that you cannot tell in a proper way the things that you don't know. So it's very important. Then we're gonna maybe have the opportunity, if there is some question from the students, you know, to go in depth into that. But it's very important when you do a journalism about European issue to really understand them. And I think the college is giving in this behalf the best preparation possible. So having said that, of course, after my 7 years as EU correspondent in Brussels, I went to the US and I moved there during the convention that then led to the victory of President Trump in 2016. And I followed his presidency until the very end. Of course, I come back from the US just 1 week ago. So my last assignment was, of course, to cover the inauguration of President Joe Biden. And for me, you know, having worked for 7 years in the EU press room, you know, talking about European issues. Of course, I was covering the economic crisis, for instance, the Brexit, the terrorism in Europe, the immigration. It was completely a change of, you know, habits and kind of topics to work on. First of all, because the beautiful things about being a journalist in the EU is that every day you can tell a different story. So you have a different topic to study, to understand, to explain to the public. During the Trump presidency, my topic was just one. It was President Trump, of course. So already that changed completely the perspective, because it was a presidency of a breaking news every day. That was really, you know, maybe in a cynical way, but journalists sometimes can be cynical. I think it was the best period ever to be a foreign correspondent in the United States, because you can see, you know, a kind of see that was a sign of an America that we don't know normally in Europe. I always used to say that America for us, for Europeans, is more an idea than a country, you know, an idea that includes so many things, involves so many things like freedom, technological advancement, you know, the idea that we have also from the movies. It's something completely different than when you are confronted with Trump America. And I really wanted in my 4 years in the US to explain that, to know that, and to explain that to the Italian public. So the result was that my correspondence, even if my headquarters was in New York, it was a correspondence of traveling a lot. And this you can find in my book. It's not a book about just what is happening in the States, in the coast, but it's a lot of book on what is happening in the middle of the US, in this kind of states that no one knows, but then at the end can decide the outcome of an election. And it's a book which is shared in different chapters according to the topic that were the main topic in Trump presidency. So of course there is economic, immigration, racism, environment, foreign policy, so the relationship, of course, also with the European Union and other countries, what was happening in Washington, and of course, healthcare, because the COVID and the pandemic had an impact, not just in Trump presidency, but I would say in Trump defeat this year. And it's an important part of my book. Each chapter is ending with what I call the C factor. That's mean how COVID and the pandemic impact that specific subject. And you know, one interesting things about people that are reading my book, I wrote it so I cannot be objective on that, but I can report what people are saying after they read that, and especially after what we have seen on January the 6th. So the assault at Capitol Hill. A lot of people that were reading my book afterwards, because my book came out the January 14, and they were saying to me, "Oh my God, you actually foreseen that. You know, if we read your book, we understand why. You know, we are not surprised anymore as we were looking at what we have seen on January the 6th." Because the reality is that there is an America that voted for Trump 4 years ago, somehow re-voted for him this year, but in a different way. If you want, then we can, go a little bit more in details. That is an America that, people in Europe don't have really an idea. And it's not just, of course, the extremist part, which is very present in, people that voted for Trump and that we have seen on January the 6th, but it's also a part of America that maybe voted twice for Obama, and then in 2016 decided to go with President Trump. And why that? Of course, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the concept of what we call the forgotten man, this white middle class that after the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, lost a little bit the capacity and the opportunity to live what is considered the American dream. And the American dream is not doing big. The American dream is having the possibility to buy an house, to send your kids to college, to buy a car every 2-3 years. This is the typical American dream. And the crisis of 2008 to 2009 was an obstacle for so many people that were living this dream, were part of this white middle class, and that suddenly were not able anymore to actually grasp and reach this dream. And the problem is that in the American mentality, one very famous political sentence that I think it was, if you wanted, the motto in general of the United States before Trump, it was, the Kennedy way of saying, don't ask to yourself what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So if you were not able to reach the dream, the idea was that it was your fault, that you were a loser, one of the worst, insults that you can hear in the United States. But actually, Trump, since his very first electoral campaign, since his speech, his inauguration speech in 2017, in January 2017, he changed this mentality. And he said to the American people, you know what? If you're not able anymore to live the American dream, it's not your fault. It's not because you are not working enough. It's the system, it's the swamp, it's the immigration, it's, the rules that are imposed on environment. It's something else. And we as a movement, we're gonna overcome that. And we're gonna make you able again to reach your dream. The problem of all of that of course he had an impact on people that voted for him, but he didn't deliver as he was supposed to. And this was even before the pandemic. One of the aspects that I underline in my book is, for instance, the economic results that President Trump was always talking about when it comes to jobs opportunity, but also, of course, to real GDP growth, were actually not so good as he was telling even before the pandemic. And then, of course, the pandemic again, changed everything.
Giovanna, thank you very much for this first insight. I would start with, I always take the privilege of asking some questions first. First of all, you witnessed the election of Trump, and then you witnessed the defeat of Trump. And I think you described what ran in between these two moments. But also, you've seen, as you mentioned, the electoral basis that Trump enjoyed in 2016, actually getting consolidated, even if the result electorally was different. I am extremely interested in seeing what was there that consolidated even more those that were convinced about him to believe even more radically in him. It's like if we see a sort of radicalization of beliefs, of even faith. As you said, in 2016, there were many that were trying, they were testing something new. Maybe it works. Mm-hmm. But then I have the impression that this year we have seen, again, a different electoral result, but a more convinced sort of fan club with those that were convinced in a way that is really a sort of, yes, a sort of religious kind of enthusiasm, as if it was a fate more than a political choice. And I think this is interesting because for Europeans, this is also, I mean, not something usual to have. And then I would have another question, if I can, maybe more difficult. Where do you see the United States 4 years from now? How can you imagine, as you have always been very good in detecting the trends and projecting things in the future, If you had to guess, right in an envelope, in a closed envelope, what would be the political scenario in 4 years from now? On the Democratic side, on the Republican side, on Trump's side, that maybe is not the Republican side anymore, I don't know. Where do you see America in 4 years?
Okay, so I'll try to be brief. It's two very
don't worry, take your
topics.
time.
So the first one, actually, you know, Federica, the electoral base of Trump changed this year compared to 2016. We were talking before about how much in 2016 what we call the, you know, white middle class then became poor white middle class due to the economic crisis. It was one of the main, you know, push towards the election of Donald Trump. That was not the case anymore in 2020. We don't have to search there, you know, the main base of votes for Donald Trump. People that voted for him in 2020, if you look at the wages range, the only one in which you had more than 50% of voters choosing Donald Trump was the range between $100,000 and $250,000 per year. We're not talking anymore about poor white, you know, people. We're talking about quite a good middle class that enjoyed, for instance, what President was doing with his fiscal reform. You know, a lot of the votes that he had and that he still have in 2020, and that were actually maybe didn't have them in 2016, but he gained them in 2020, were also linked to that. You know, so more richer people than poorer people. And then you have the extreme, which became the core, an important core of his basis. But I will say that it counts for the 30% of also people that voted for him. Instead, when Trump, you know, was out of office just, you know, a few weeks ago, the last day of its mandate, he had the lowest popularity rate of every US president going out, and it was around 30%, because what's happened on January the 6th, and especially his you know, his behavior after the election, the fact that he didn't accept the results, that he was undermining, if you want, the democratic process, that was something that even this kind of voters, you know, that maybe voted for him for economic reason, even if they don't like him, his way of talking, his way of thinking. But at that point, when they were confronted with the reality of a leader that was putting at stake, you know, the democratic value of the nation, they abandoned him. And that's not a case that, if you want, the states that he lost the most were like, you know, former like blue collar states as Michigan, that, you know, he won, sorry, in 2016, and then he lost this year. Of course, Pennsylvania. And in the book, for instance, I'm talking about what is the whitest, poorest county in America, which is in Kentucky, the Lee County. And I was there, and that was in 2017. It was an interesting experience, because more than 80% of the people there voted for President Trump in 2016, but more than 50% had Obamacare. So this year, Trump won in Kentucky and won also in this county, but with a majority of 51%. So he lost, you know, 30% of votes there, because people were disappointed. One thing that I think you really underestimate was the impact of the pandemic towards his electoral base when we talk about white poor people, because these people were not like him, like unafraid of the pandemic, or were, I don't know, people that were saying, no, that doesn't exist, it doesn't have any effects. They were scared of the pandemic, because most of the time they didn't have, you know, proper healthcare and private healthcare. So there was something that was scaring for them. And he really missed the empathy with these people during this electoral campaign. I think that was one of the reason why at the end he lost the election this year, because, you know, he underestimated an issue that was a major issue for a big part of people that voted for him in 2016. And then, of course, we were saying there were the extreme that maybe already started to choose him in 2016, but they became even more for him in 2020. The people that we have seen assaulting Capitol Hill, for instance, between the people that we've seen assaulting Capitol Hill, there were people that reached Washington towards private jets. Again, we're not talking about, you know, the poor working class. That's not the case. That's our people who are extreme from an ideological point of view, and that were always present in the United States. It's not a new phenomenon, if you want. The problem is that for the first time, that someone that were legitimated them in the White House, and we're not condemning them. There was a report of the Department of Interior in the US last October, so a few months, you know, before what we have seen at the Capitol Hill on January 6th. And the Department of Interior were saying that the most important threat for national security in the United States at that time was internal terrorism from white supremacists and right-wing groups. So that was there, you know, everyone knew that, but nothing has been done to moderate this, to condemn this. On the other hand, a lot has been done to actually legitimate them. And so that's why this part of votes for Trump grow up compared to 2016. But again, it's not the majority of its voters. That's always very important to underline. And then the second question is how going to see the US in 4 years? Okay, if I have this question, I'm going to have a great major job in one of the big American think tanks if I'm the answer to that.
Let's do this way. Let's do this way, Giovanna. We take this part out of the website, so it's only among us, and then this part will have a technical problem, and in 1 week will disappear from the records.
No, about when it's going to be in 4 years. So what I have to say actually is that in the past 4 years in the US, I had the great opportunity to witness, let's say, a waking up of young activists. And I think that was really a turning point also in this election. Young people not just went into the street, but went to vote. You know, in Italy, we have a way of saying, I don't know if it exists in English, when the streets are full of protesters, then the ballots are empty. No, that's what we used to say in Italy. Actually, that was not the case.
Now both empty.
No, in the US, actually. In the US, that was, you know, years of major activism, mainly starting from young people. I'm thinking about the March for Our Lives after, you know, the horrible shooting in the Parkland High School. That was not, of course, the first and not the last shooting in a high school in the United States, but for the first time, you had this major movement that came out from that with a huge march in Washington, in which the real engagement of these young people then became, you know, 18 and 19 and 20 years old, a college student, that actually really focused their energy and their effort in the past 2 years to involve young people, to convince them to go and vote. And again, this summer, what we have seen with Black Lives Matter, of course, was not just, you know, part of the young movement, but young people were absolutely, you know, central on making this protest, first of all, not just being a protest in the street, but became also a kind of political demand. And at the end, increasing the participation as well, not just of young people, but also Black community at the ballots on November. And again, environment, you know, 3 major issues where young people in the United States are making a difference, and not just in the activism, but really in the way in which they participate to the political process. And so that's, in general, gives me a lot of hopes looking at the future of the United States, because when you have young people which involve themselves and not just, you know, going in the street and screaming, but really being active politically and participating, I think this is always a sign of a country which is in a good health, because, you know, there is hope for the future. Having said that, of course, and it somehow is linked, you know, the United States are living a very important demographic changing, not just when it comes to, you know, young people, of course, but also when it comes to immigrants and to being even more multicultural than used to be. What we have seen lately, for instance, of the results like in Texas, of course, in Texas, Trump won, but this time the gap and the difference between Republican and Democrats was very, you know, small. because in Texas you have a changing of the population, not just because there is an increase, of course, of Latin American community there, but also of young people coming from Silicon Valley. Part of Silicon Valley is moving to Austin, for instance, and part of it to New York. So you can see that, and so I think it's going to be a different country than it is for now. And with Biden presidency, I think one of his main efforts is going to be to actually overturn completely in most of the topics Donald Trump legacy. So we are going to see an America that is going back to be a country where, I don't know, LGBT rights is going to be, with no threat, or when it comes to environment, completely different kind of policies. When it comes to immigration, completely different kinds of policy. And also when it comes to foreign policy, of course, not in everything. That's, I think it's one of the interesting part of the, change of the administration, maybe where we're going to see more continuity than other fields. But of course, we're going to see an America very different than the one that we have seen with Trump. And that will say that in the Republican Party, there is now, after Trump, because people tend to say, but the Republicans didn't really lose, because actually they gain some seats, and it's true, in the Senate, and more than in the Senate, they gain some seats in the House, because in the Senate, on the other end, they lost seats, very important seats, like the one in Georgia. But actually, it's the first time since 1932 that a president which is seeking for election, he lost the presidency, he lost the Senate, he lost the House. So the Republicans are actually right now doing a very important, I don't know, self-examination of the situation, because they need a change. They tried to go to the extreme, and it didn't work. And so I think there's going to be even more important movement inside the party on making a different kind of choice from years from now. I'm looking with main attention some like Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, a Republican Black senator, which is an incredible speaker. And I think, that could be an important sign, or maybe a woman, maybe there is this kind of push in this moment to move forward and go, after Trump and find something completely different and completely the opposite, if you really want to survive as a party. And going back to the original value of the party that Trump didn't respect, because if we think about it, it's like, I don't know, trade policy, for instance, that was something that Ronald Reagan, could never accept. It's not really the part and the roots of the Republican Party, the economic policy that he tried to push forward.
In fact, I perfectly remember that in the in the pre-Trump era, it was more the Democrats that were skeptical about some of the trade agreements we were discussing, rather than the Republicans. Now it's the world upside down. And indeed, I think one of the most interesting things will be to see the dynamics between the Republican Party and Trump, and what that will bring, if what Trump will do. And moving forward, because this is somehow what we have experienced and witnessed in the last years, I think it's very interesting what you mentioned about the fact that maybe the foreign policy is going to be the field where more continuity will be guaranteed. I imagine, and I guess that this will also be a part of an effort that Biden will try to make to unite Congress, at least on some bipartisan issues. And as he probably cannot do it on any of the domestic issues, because the policies domestically the Trump administration had were obviously not sustainable for any of the Democrats, and for sure not for President Biden. I guess that he will try to identify some fields of foreign policy where he can try to gather a bipartisan consensus in Congress. In this respect, it will be very interesting, obviously, for us to see what attitude will be there vis-a-vis Europe, the European Union as such, NATO, on which files the Biden administration will engage more or less. Personally, I found very reassuring to see many old friends coming back in the State Department in particular, but not only. But on the other side, I really very much agree with you when you say that there's it's not just going back to the past. America is different,
No.
but also the rest of the world is different, and Europe as well. So I guess that will be one of the most interesting elements to see, indeed, which elements of discontinuity will there be in the foreign policy of the Biden administration compared to the Trump one. I remind our students that they can continue to ask the questions in the chat, and I will read them out. I will we can move back and forth from the US to Brussels, but I have a question on a very basic one, and I think that here you can really reply as a friend of the college, as an ancienne, but also obviously as a professional journalist. How was it being the correspondent from Brussels, and did the college prepare you to tell the stories of the European Union? How did you bridge the gap of information between the European institutions and the European public opinions? How did you find that challenge? Sincerely.
I found it very interesting, but also very rewarding. You know, I had, again, I'm using a little bit of the cynicism that maybe my job sometimes come out, but I had the opportunity, I would call it an opportunity because it was an opportunity, to be there in very crucial years, Federica. You know that because it was the years of the economic crisis, the years of immigration crisis, the years of terrorism crisis, the year of the Brexit. I went away just after, you know, the Brexit referendum. I went to the US. So it was incredible, you know, as a European correspondent, having the opportunity to cover such a major stories in my mandate. Normally, there are colleagues that are since, you know, ages don't have the opportunity to cover so many topics, or even one of those topics. So from that point of view, it was very interesting. And I think that the college was, for me, the turning point when it comes to preparation, because you know, normally when a journalist is appointed as an EU correspondent, it comes from or the political fields or the economic fields, or their newspapers, or, you know, the network, whatever. So that means that when they arrive into the EU, they need, you know, to understand a little bit what is this, the EU bubble, and what is the EU mechanism, which is not so, you know, user-friendly as soon as you arrive there.
It's not self-evident. No, not always.
No, it's not self-evident. So, and you know, I always think that until when you don't understand something, you cannot really explain it. So normally, you know, colleagues coming from their own home country and from the political sector or the, you know, economic sector, when they arrive to Brussels, they need, let's say, 3 to 6 months to really, you know, understand what is going on and how does it work, and, you know, all the policy making process, which are, you know, not so simple if you actually don't know them and you don't masterize them. And already, you know, thanks to the college, I didn't need these 6 months. I knew exactly, you know, how all the process were working, and that was very important because when I arrived in Brussels, just if I don't remember well, I think it was like the week before, Greece was asking for the first loan. So it was the very beginning of the economic crisis, and that was something very challenging, you know, to explain to the general public. And so you need to be into it to understand how decision-making process was working. There's so many change has been done due to the crisis as well to this decision-making process. So for me, it was very important to have this background of preparation that the college gave to me, because I didn't need, you know, time to acclimate. I just was in the middle of the ocean, and I knew how to swim. And that was already, you know, one of the things that I will always be thankful to the college for. And second things, of course, in networking. I mean, it's not a mystery for anyone that the majority of people and, you know, bureaucrats, as someone used to call them, but that's true. Most of them, they are ancien of the college. They come from the college. Some of them, you know, they were even in my same promotion, and now they, you know, went up and having very important roles inside the institution. And this is very important because networking and knowledge are the two main you know, things that a journalist should have in his wallet, and the college gave them to me since the very beginning. I was arriving in Brussels and knowing how, you know, the decision-making process was working, and knowing already a lot of people that were part of the decision-making process, and also having the opportunity to connect them. Because one thing about the ancien that maybe, you know, for the students for now is important to know, if they didn't know that already, is that ancien used to cooperate among each other. I mean, I always have to say that every ancien that I contact as an ancien, you know, they were always very open to to try to help, to try to see what they can do for me, because, you know, the college is an experience that bond people, and normally, let's say, most of the students had great experiences, so they are really willing and open-minded to help new students, and that was really very important for me. So absolutely was, you know, fundamental in my preparation and on my job to having the background of the College of Europe.
Another question on your professional background, then we might go back to the United States. What advice would you give to a student at the college today that would like to become a journalist, and in particular a EU correspondent tomorrow?
So I think they're already doing what I would normally suggest when I meet young people that ask me, so what I should do, you know, what's the path that you can advise on. I always say the important things is to specialize yourself, because, you know, wanting to be a journalist can mean so many things, and it's a kind of environment very competitive, of course. So you make a difference if you know more of anyone else in a certain field. So that's why, you know, also having the preparation of the college, it was one of the reasons why I was appointed a EU correspondent when I was 29 years for my network, which is in Italy is not so common, as Federica knows very well. But because I had, you know, this background and this preparation, so already, you know, being in the College of Europe, choosing the College of Europe to improve your knowledge and your preparation about the EU fields, that's mean that most probably, you know, foreign affairs and EU policy is going to be your main interest as a journalist. That's really, I would say, a great step to do. And then the other things is that, you know, is a kind of job, maybe it's the same in politics, I don't know, but when you are young and you meet other journalists, they always say to you, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. You know, it's an horrible job. It's very difficult. There is no opportunity. You know, it's you don't earn a lot of money. This is true, unfortunately. It's not like a job to make full of money. That's not the kind of choice. But on the other hand, I always think that this is something that I will never do. Because one of the realities is that to become a journalist, you need to be persistent. You need to be motivated. So there's going to be plenty of people in your life that are going to tell you, no, this is not the case. You're not good enough. There is not a place for you here. And so to be resilient is one of the main, you know, advice. Also because once you get to become a journalist, you really need to put that in practice. Just if you are resilient, you can manage to obtain the most important interviews. You can manage to be in the place where you need to be and to catch that breaking news that no one else has. So it's really a matter of, you know, also character, and never give up. Even if people are saying to you that is not the case, go forward, because at the end, you know, you will stand.
This is an excellent promotion for the college. Someone saying, I managed to become the EU correspondent on a major TV network at 29 because I was prepared, and my preparation was sound because I was at the college. I think this will go in our commercials next year.
But it's absolutely true. I do really believe that, seriously, because, you know, I could have done at one point, my choice was between journalist school in Italy, which, by the way, in Italy is making the difference, because, you know, once you get out from the journalist school, you are in Italy, the journalists are like profession, you know, they have a kind of bar like for lawyers. So when you get out of the journalist school, you are automatic enrolled in this bar. Otherwise, you need to do it, you know, through your practice, and find, you know, kind of a newspaper of an editorial office that give you the opportunity to actually, you know, get into the profession. But no matter that, choosing for me was really like the sliding doors of my life. I could have choose between the journalism school and the College of Europe, and I then I end up with the College of Europe, because I did at that point already believe that, you know, being prepared on something more than anyone else would then make a difference, and that was my case.
I couldn't agree more. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with the microphone. I couldn't agree more on the importance of being well prepared on what you're doing. One other question, now going back to the United States, is something about you, about which you already hinted. The foreign policy choices in the transition. You mentioned the fact that on some issues there might be continuity. What do you think will be the attitude of the Biden administration towards China? Do you think that this will be one of the elements of continuity more than others? And what about Russia?
Yeah, indeed, I will say that if I have to underline the two main fields where I'm going to see continuity in the future, it's for sure China and Middle East. China, in a sense that, of course, let's say the tone and the kind of confrontational behavior will be very different than the one that we had, with Donald Trump, that was more, outspoken, just to say something. But the idea is going to be the same, and that was made very clear already, not just by Tony Blinken, the new Secretary of State, but also yesterday, actually, President Biden had his first major speech on foreign policy. And China, of course, was one of the subject of the speech. And I think that actually the kind of stand of the Trump administration towards China, in my opinion, help also the European Union to raise a little bit their voice more in this field, set them free, the fact also that America was not there anymore to protect us as we were used to, but it was something completely different. Somehow, help us also to go a little bit more strong towards center practice in Beijing that were not, convenient for none of us, not just for the United States, but also for, the European Union. And I would say that this kind of, confrontational mood will stay also with the Biden administration. When I talk about Middle East, it's because Blinken himself said, for instance, the Abraham Accord are an important achievement, and they should, remain and should be even implemented more. And I don't think that is casual, the fact that they decided not to move back the capital from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. They're gonna keep the capital in Jerusalem, the embassy in Jerusalem. And I think this is an important sign about, the fact that they're looking for continuity in this behalf to try to go forward this path of peace agreement treatment between Israel and some of the Arab states. When it comes to Russia, on the other hand, I see a completely different kind of behavior and approach compared to the Trump administration. Not because, my compare was also very hard towards Russia, but the problem was what was happening at the White House. And Donald Trump never hid his fascination for Vladimir Putin. I remember, for instance, one of the first time Donald Trump saw Putin after the election that Putin won, of course, not in a very democratic way, we could say, you're more used about that, Federica, the fact that their foreign policy advisor was saying to Trump, please don't congratulate yourself for the victory in the election with Vladimir Putin, because, that's not something the US do to someone that won the election without having really a competition, in this kind of election. And of course, the first things that Donald Trump did as soon as he sit down next to Putin was, oh, congratulations, you did a great job, you had a great victory. So that was impossible, to really have a kind of hard, or let's say more challenging kind of approach and relationship towards Russia with a president that was so keen, on the other hand, to have even more strong bond with Vladimir Putin itself. And then when it comes to other issues, I think that it was very important, the speech of yesterday. Of course, there's going to be completely different approach when it comes to kind of multilateral policy that, of course, it was one of the main signs of Biden administration, the fact they went back to Paris Agreement when it comes to climate, to the World Health Organization. They are going to be even more involved with NATO than, of course, the previous administration. There's going to be this new, it's not actually new, it's how US always used to be, no matter who was in charge before Trump, you know, this kind of pushing towards a kind of multilateral world organization where, you know, countries talk between each other when they need to confront major challenges. But I would say that it's going to be also interesting to see how it's going to be towards the EU. Because, for instance, talking about this major speech of yesterday, there were just two things that were not, you know, nominated in the speech. Iran, which is also very interesting to see. Of course, Biden said that he wants to, you know, to go back to the Iran agreement, and that, you know, Federica, you were one of the major architects of it. So we really hope that the US can, you know, can go back to that. But I think that they are, you know, trying to understand how to move in this direction. And I think it was not a case that yesterday Iran was not even, you know, in the speech. As it was not in the speech, not even once, he said the words European Union or Europe. He talked about Germany, talked about France, our allies, UK, and then in general about our allies. What does it mean? That we will have to see in the future. Of course, we have to wait for a kind of, you know, administration that's going to be more welcoming about the EU integration, not a kind of an administration as Trump was, that was trying to push towards I don't know, the implosion of the integration process, because we know very well how Trump was, for instance, a big fan of the Brexit. You know, that's not going to be the case now. But I don't even think that on the other hand, we're going to see like the EU as the new main, I don't know, subject to talk with. You know, it's going to still be single states that are major in the European Union instead of the Union as itself. In this behalf, another things that I noticed was that, you know, when he was elected, when he won the election, it's not like Trump. Trump, when he was elected, he didn't expect that, you know, so was not very prepared. When it comes to calling foreign leaders or having a call from foreign leaders, it was a little bit chaos, you know. Yeah, okay, who Taiwan is calling before China? Yes, of course. There was not really a preparation behind that. On the other hand, we know that in the Biden circle, they are pro. So they really study the order of the different kind of phone call that, you know, President Biden had to do as soon as he knew that he was elected. And I think it's not a case that he called the main European countries, but he called the EU institution just 3 weeks after the news of his election, and the UN 4 weeks after. So I think this is something interesting that is saying a lot about the fact that we don't have to expect United States that wants to be, I don't know, protagonist in the European Union policy or field of future.
And I think that's your view on this, having followed both Brussels and Washington. And when I say Washington, I only say it's to refer to the United States in general, because as you mentioned, you were based mainly in New York, but you were traveling all over the country. You have both perspectives, and also clearly the anxiety that can be lived in Brussels when they notice that the telephone call doesn't come, and then in the press room you will be asked, have you been called? It's difficult. But just to integrate that, I noticed that that on the other side, John Kerry immediately had a very long video conference with, I think, if I'm not wrong, Borrell and Timmermans on climate change action jointly across the Atlantic. So probably, I agree with you, we will have I would say a selection of topics on which the United States will reach out for bold cooperation with the European Union as such, and other issues on which they will probably go bilaterally or just look at broader alliances. I think that our time has come to an end. The hour has been very interesting and for sure also an inspiration for our students on also some of the possibilities of a professional career. I have to ask you this because you said that the anciens support each other once they become part of that family. And I know that our students this year in particular are living complicated times because, as you can imagine, well, you remember life at the college. You live the college life in Bruges, in Natolin. They also live in one college, so even more in campus. And you can imagine the impact of COVID. You mentioned this in your book. There's a C factor on every topic. Yeah. Imagine the C factor in the college is obviously heavy. And so maybe on behalf of our students, even if they didn't raise it directly, but I would raise it for them, just a sort of call to an ancien to support our students of this promotion in particular, and also the previous promotion once they will get out of the college, because it's true, the college prepares you for being the best in your own field, especially on EU studies, but it's also true that COVID times are putting a lot of pressure on the student life. And so I'm sure that this is also the reason why I thought of inviting you, creating the network already now that they are still in the college, but looking towards their future, towards the alumni network, to be there for this promotion in particular, because I think they will look up at you, ancien, for inspiration, for contacts, and for support. And I'm sure that many of our students that might be interested in starting a career in journalism, I'm sure that they can count on you personally and all other alumni that can give advices or contacts or just moral support if needed. So this is more of a request than an appeal. And then obviously, yes.
In this behalf, may I tell you something, because I remember that, you know, the first experience of networking with an anciano was for the final paper. So all of you guys will have to do the final paper there. And of course, you know, all the professors at the college push you to do a final paper where actually you have real and case studies, and so you need to contact like ancien. I did it, you know, when I was doing my final paper, which is in the library, because it was one of that was published. So I did good at College of Europe. That's important.
So now you have 2 books in the library.
Yeah, I have 2 books in the library. But by the way, and it was already about freedom of the press, of course, my final paper, and I think it was like the EU, I don't know, the EU law about freedom of the press. I don't remember, I'm sorry, but it was good, I think. Anyway, so that's already the first opportunity. You have an incredible ancien organization with all the mail address of people, so just write, reach out, and I'm sure that's, you know, the first opportunity that can bring to something else afterwards. So.
And then I know that your promotion was supposed to have their gathering last year, that was postponed due to COVID. So this is also an invitation to see all of you in Bruges as soon as this will be allowed. We will try to have in-person meetings again, and hope to see you in person in Bruges, Giovanna, as soon as possible. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for sharing with us your insights on both the United States, what you have seen and witnessed in this during these years in the United States, but also your professional experience in Brussels. And I'm sure this has been extremely helpful and interesting for all. Thank you again. The talk will stay on our website. And again, good luck for the book and also for the following steps of the career. Grazie.
Okay, thank you, Federica, and in bocca al lupo, as we say in Italian, to all the students.
Bye bye. To you as well. Bye bye.